Picture this for a moment. It's 5:30 in the morning. The house is quiet. The street outside is quiet. Most of the world is still asleep, wrapped up in their blankets, hitting snooze for the third time, telling themselves just 5 more minutes. And in that same quiet darkness, there's another person, in another house, somewhere in this country, who is already up, already dressed, already moving. Not because someone forced them to, not because they had to catch a flight or make it to some emergency. They're up because they made a decision a long time ago that how they start their day determines how they live their life. And here's the truth, my friend. Those two people, the one hitting snooze and the one already moving, they are not living in two different worlds by accident. They are living in two different worlds because of what they do in that first hour after they open their eyes. I'm telling you, if you want to understand why some people's lives seem to expand every single year while other people's lives seem to shrink, stay the same, or slowly fall apart, you don't need to look at their bank account first. You don't need to look at their job title first. Look at their mornings. Look at what they do in that first hour before the world starts pulling at them, before the phone starts buzzing, before the emails start piling up. That first hour, my friends, is not just the start of your day. It is the preview of your entire life. Because how you do anything is how you do everything. And how you handle that first hour is a pretty good indicator of how your soul is. Then tame. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how the most successful people you know, or the most successful people you've read about, seem to guard their mornings like it's the most valuable real estate they own? And here's something to think about. It is the most valuable real estate they own. Because in the morning, before the world has had a chance to hand you its problems, its demands, its distractions, you actually get to decide what kind of day you're going to have. Later in the day, life starts making decisions for you. The meeting runs long. The traffic is bad. Somebody calls with bad news. But in that first hour, nobody's making decisions but you. And I'm confident about this. The people who win in life are not the people with the fewest problems. They are the people who learned, a long time ago, to take control of the one part of the day that nobody else can touch, and that's the morning, before everybody else wakes up and starts asking things of them. Let me tell you about a fellow I once knew. I'll just call him Ray. Ray was, by his own admission, about as unmotivated as a person could be. He'd wake up at the very last possible second, roll out of bed, half-dressed, grab whatever was closest to the door, and rush out into a day he had absolutely no control over. His mornings, if you could even call them that, consisted of chaos. Missing his keys, forgetting his lunch, snapping at his family because he was already behind before the day even started. And Ray used to say, "That's just how mornings are for me. I'm not a morning person." Now here's the truth, my friends. There is no such thing as not being a morning person. There is only being a person who has not yet decided to take control of their morning. Ray didn't change because someone gave him a lecture about it. He changed because one day, sitting in his car after a particularly disastrous morning, late for work again, coffee spilled on his shirt, he asked himself a simple question. What would my life look like if I actually controlled the first hour of my day, instead of the first hour controlling me? And that question bothered him enough that he decided to test it, just for 30 days. He started waking up 1 hour earlier. That's it. That was the whole experiment. 1 hour earlier. And in that hour, he did 3 simple things. He drank a glass of water before anything else touched his body. He moved. Just a little. Some light stretching. Sometimes a short walk. And he spent 10 minutes writing down exactly what he wanted to accomplish that day and why it mattered. Nothing complicated. Nothing fancy. Just water, movement, and clarity. And I'm telling you, within 2 weeks, Ray said something changed that he couldn't quite explain. He said the days felt longer, in a good way. He said he felt like he was walking into his life instead of being dragged into it. Within 3 months, Ray had been promoted at work. Not because his morning routine magically impressed his boss, but because a person who starts the day in control tends to carry that same control into every meeting, every decision, every conversation for the rest of the day. That's the truth about mornings. They're not just about waking up early. They're about waking up on purpose. Here's the key to understanding why this works. Your mind, first thing in the morning, is like wet cement. Whatever gets pressed into it in those first few minutes tends to set the shape for the rest of life. Wow. If the first thing you do is grab your phone and scroll through other people's arguments, other people's vacations, other people's outrage. You have just pressed all of that into the wet cement of your mind before you had a single original thought of your own. But if the first thing you do is something that belongs to you, something that builds you, something calm and intentional, you set that cement in a completely different shape. Tell me, does that make sense? Of course it does. You already know this deep down because you've felt both versions of that morning. You've had the mornings where you woke up and immediately felt behind, rushed, reactive. And you've had, even if rarely, the mornings where you woke up early, took your time, and felt like you could handle anything the day threw at you. The difference wasn't the day. The difference was the first hour. Now let's talk about discipline for a moment, because this is where most people get stuck. They hear about morning routines and they think, well, that sounds nice for people who are naturally disciplined. But that's just not me. And here's the truth, my friends. Discipline is not something you're born with. Discipline is a muscle. And just like a muscle, it grows through repeated use and it weakens through neglect. Nobody walks into a gym for the first time and lifts 300 pounds. They start with what they can handle and they add a little more and a little more until one day the weight that used to be impossible is now their warm-up. Your morning discipline works the exact same way. You don't need to wake up at 4 in the morning tomorrow and run 5 miles and read 3 chapters of a book and meditate for an hour. That's not discipline. That's a setup for failure. What you need is one small change, held consistently, until it becomes so automatic that it requires no willpower at all. That's how a muscle grows. Not from one dramatic session, but from repeated, manageable effort applied consistently over time. Let me tell you about a woman I once worked alongside. I'll call her Denise. Denise ran a small business, and like a lot of business owners, she was completely exhausted. Not from lack of ambition, but from lack of structure. Her mornings were consumed immediately by other people's emergencies. The moment she woke up, she'd check her phone, and within minutes, she was answering emails, putting out fires, reacting to whatever crisis had developed overnight. By the time she actually sat down to work on her own priorities, half the day was already gone, and she was already running on empty. Denise used to say she felt like a firefighter in her own life, constantly reacting, never building. And here's what changed everything for her. She made one rule. No phone for the first 30 minutes after waking up. That's it. Just 30 minutes of silence, where the only thing she was allowed to do was think, plan, and prepare. In that silence, she started asking herself a question every single morning. What is the one thing that if I accomplish it today would make the biggest difference? And then she'd write that one thing down, and she'd protect time for it before anything else could interrupt her. Within a matter of months, Denise's business had grown more than it had in the previous 2 years combined. Not because she suddenly worked more hours. She actually worked fewer hours. But those hours were no longer being hijacked by other people's priorities. She had reclaimed the one part of the day where she got to decide what mattered most, instead of letting the world decide for her. Now here's something worth thinking about. What is it, specifically, about that first hour that has such enormous power over the rest of your day, and honestly, over the rest of your life? I believe it comes down to momentum. Think about a snowball rolling down a hill. At the very top, it's small, it's fragile. You could stop it with one hand. But if you let it roll even a little bit, it starts to gather more snow, and it gets bigger, and it picks up speed, and eventually it becomes something that's impossible to stop with your bare hands. Your mornings work exactly like that snowball. The first decision you make, whether it's to get up when the alarm goes off or hit snooze, whether it's to drink water or reach for your phone, whether it's to move your body or collapse back into the pillow, that first decision is small. It seems insignificant in the moment, but it's rolling downhill, gathering momentum, and by 9 in the morning, it has become the entire shape of your day. Start the snowball rolling in the right direction, and by the time evening comes, you'll be amazed at what you've built. Start it rolling in the wrong direction, and by evening, you'll be wondering where the day went and why you feel like you accomplished nothing at all. Let's talk about gratitude for a moment, because this fits right into the morning conversation, and it's something people often overlook. Here's the truth, my friends. Your mind cannot fully focus on scarcity and abundance at the same time. It can't fully hold fear and gratitude in the same breath. So if you start your morning by immediately worrying about everything that could go wrong, today you are training your mind, first thing, to scan for threats. But if you start your morning by acknowledging even 3 small things you're grateful for, even something as simple as having woken up, having a roof over your head, Having people in your life who care about you, you are training your mind, first thing, to scan for what's good, what's working, what's possible. And that changes how you interpret everything else that happens that day. The same difficult meeting that would normally ruin your morning becomes instead just an obstacle to solve. The same delay in traffic that would normally make you furious becomes instead a few extra minutes to think. Gratitude first thing in the morning isn't about pretending your problems don't exist. It's about deciding, before the world hands you its chaos, that you're going to notice what's good as clearly as you notice what's hard. Now I want to bring your attention to something else that happens in that first hour. Something that most people completely neglect. And that's the relationship you have with your own body. Have you ever noticed how differently you think, how differently you feel on a morning when you move your body even just a little, compared to a morning when you go straight from bed to chair to car to desk without moving at all? Movement in the morning is like opening the windows in a house that's been closed up all night. The air starts circulating. Everything feels a little more alive. You don't need an hour at the gym. A short walk, some stretching, a few minutes of movement that gets your blood flowing and you're breathing deeper. That's enough to remind your body, first thing, that it's alive, that it's capable, that it's ready. And here's something to think about. The way you treat your body in the morning sends a signal to your mind about how much you value yourself. If the first thing you do is neglect your body entirely, rushing past it like it's an inconvenience, you're quietly telling yourself that you don't matter enough to invest even a few minutes in. But if you take even 5 or 10 minutes to move, to breathe, to wake your body up intentionally, you're sending yourself a very different signal. You're saying, I matter enough to take care of first, before I start taking care of everybody and everything else. Let me tell you about a young man I once knew. I'll call him Marcus. Marcus was sharp, ambitious, full of ideas, but he was also, by his own description, completely scattered. He'd wake up already anxious, already replaying yesterday's mistakes, already worrying about today's problems, and by the time he actually started his workday, he was mentally exhausted before he'd done a single productive thing. Marcus decided to try something simple. Every morning, before he did anything else, he'd spend just 10 minutes writing. Not anything fancy. Just whatever was on his mind. Worries, ideas, plans, frustrations, whatever needed to come out. He called it clearing the fog. And here's what he discovered. By putting those thoughts on paper first thing, he wasn't carrying them around in his head all day, distracting him, draining him. He was starting each day with a clear mind instead of a cluttered one. Marcus said it was like sweeping the front porch before guests arrive. You wouldn't want people walking through a mess to get into your house. And you shouldn't want your entire day to walk through a mental mess to get into your mind. Within a few months, Marcus said he felt sharper, calmer, more capable of handling whatever came his way. Not because his problems had disappeared, but because he was no longer starting each day already buried under them. Now let's talk about purpose for a moment, because this is where the morning conversation becomes about more than just productivity. Here's the truth, my friends. A morning routine without purpose is just a checklist. But a morning routine connected to why you're doing what you're doing, that becomes fuel. Tell me, why do you want to build the life you're building? Why do you want to grow your business, strengthen your health, improve your relationships, expand your finances? If you can't answer that question clearly, then no amount of waking up early is going to sustain itself for very long, because discipline without purpose runs out of gas eventually. But discipline connected to a clear reason. That's the kind of discipline that can carry you for years, even decades. So here's something worth doing every single morning, alongside whatever physical routine you build. Spend just a minute or two reconnecting with your why. Not vague hopes, specific reasons. I'm building this business because I want my family to have options I never had. I'm improving my health because I want to be strong enough to enjoy my life for decades to come. I'm strengthening this relationship because the people I love deserve my full presence, not my leftover energy. When you connect your morning actions to a purpose that actually matters to you, waking up early stops feeling like sacrifice and starts feeling like alignment. Let's talk about relationships for a moment, because this is another area that morning habits quietly shape, whether you realize it or not. Have you ever noticed how the mood you nurture in when you wake up tends to leak out onto the people closest to you? If you wake up rushed, irritated, and reactive, who absorbs that energy first? Usually the people you love most. Your spouse, your children, the people sitting across the breakfast table from you. But if you wake up calm, intentional, and grounded, that energy leaks out too, just in a completely different direction. I once knew a father who told me that the biggest change in his relationship with his teenage children didn't come from a long conversation or a big gesture. It came from something much smaller. He started waking up 20 minutes earlier, just so he wasn't rushing through breakfast every morning, snapping at everyone to hurry up. Those 20 minutes gave him enough calm to actually look his kids in the eye before they left for school, to ask them a real question, to listen to the answer without half his attention already out the door. He said that small change, repeated every single morning, rebuilt more trust with his children than any single conversation ever could. Because trust isn't built in one dramatic moment. It's built in 1,000 small mornings where someone chooses patience over rush, presence over distraction. Now here's something to think about regarding finances. Because even this area of your life is shaped more by your mornings than you might realize. The person who wakes up and immediately reacts to their day, who never carves out quiet time to think clearly about their goals, tends to make financial decisions reactively too. Impulsive purchases, avoided budgets, decisions made out of stress rather than clarity. But the person who protects even 15 minutes in the morning to think clearly, to review their goals, to remind themselves what they're actually working toward, tends to make financial decisions from a place of intention rather than impulse. I once knew a man who told me that the turning point in getting his finances under control wasn't for a spreadsheet or a budgeting app, although those things helped. It was a 5-minute habit he built into his morning, where he'd simply ask himself, does this decision I'm about to make today move me closer to the life I actually want? Or does it just feel good for a moment? That single question, asked consistently every morning, changed how he spent, how he saved, and eventually how much freedom he had. Let's bring this all together for a moment, my friends, because I want you to see how all of these threads, attitude, discipline, gratitude, movement, clarity, purpose, relationships, finances, they're not separate categories. They're all connected through the same first hour of your day. The person who wakes up and takes control of that hour is quietly, consistently building a stronger mind, a healthier body, a clearer purpose, deeper relationships, and wiser financial decisions, all from the exact same daily investment. And the person who surrenders that hour, who lets the world dictate how the day begins, is quietly, consistently weakening all of those same areas without even realizing where the erosion is coming from. Here's something to think about. If small, consistent morning habits could quietly build a stronger you over the next year, would you be willing to give up just 1 hour of sleep to make that happen? I'm confident that most people, if they were honest with themselves, would say yes. But here's the harder question. Are you willing to actually do it? Not just today, not just for a week, but for the next 30 days, the next 90 days, long enough for this new pattern to become who you are instead of something you're trying. Because here's the truth, my friends. It's not the first morning that changes your life. It's the 1,000th morning. It's the mornings you don't feel like doing it, and you do it anyway. It's the mornings when it's cold outside, when you're tired, when it would be so much easier to just stay under the covers. Those are the mornings that actually build something, because anyone can wake up early when they feel inspired. It takes a different kind of person to wake up early when they don't. Let me leave you with one final image, my friends. Think about someone building a house, brick by brick. On day one, there's nothing to see but a foundation. It doesn't look like much. If you judged the entire project by day one, you'd think nothing meaningful was happening. But brick by brick, day after day, something starts to take shape. Walls rise, a structure appears, and eventually, months later, there stands a home, strong enough to shelter a family for generations. Nobody looks at that finished house and says, well, that was just luck. They understand it was built, brick by brick, through consistent effort applied over time. Your life is being built the exact same way, one morning at a time. Every morning you take control of is a brick. Every morning you surrender to chaos is a missing brick. Or worse, a crack in the foundation. And I'm telling you, whether you realize it or not, you are building something right now, today, with how you choose to start this next morning. So here's what I want you to do, my friends, and I want you to actually do this, not just think about it. Tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, before you rush into your day, give yourself just 1 hour. Just one. In that hour, drink some water. Move your body, even a little. Take a few minutes to write down what matters most to you today and why. That's it. That's the whole assignment. Not a complicated system. Not an expensive program. Just 1 hour, reclaimed, protected, and used with intention. Because here's the truth, my friends. Your life is not going to change because of one dramatic decision made in a moment of due inspiration. Your life is going to change because of what you choose to do tomorrow morning, and the morning after that, and the morning after that. Quietly, consistently, brick by brick, until one day you look back and realize the life you're living now is nothing like the life you were living before you decided to take back control of your mornings. So tell me, what time are you setting your alarm for tonight? Because tomorrow morning, my friends, is where your next chapter actually begins.